Well, don't you just love it when you are having so much fun and you run out of time because you're not keeping awareness of how much time you got left? Well, welcome back once again, Exorcist fans, to part 2 of my analysis of the season finale of the Exorcist TV series, Chapter 10, entitled 3 Rooms. And we, of course, there will be spoilers just in case you didn't see part 1 already, but we will pick up where I was before, when I was talking about how, in an effort to try to save Bennett from being deceived and his soul captured by these demons, Marcus has now goaded the very jealous and angry Maria Walters into finally claiming what is quote-unquote rightfully hers by demanding that the demons possess her instead of doing so to Bennett, who is about to give in his delirium because he believes that it is his sister, his deceased sister Anna, who he is seeing instead of the demons who it actually is. Now, once more, I question why this happened as I did in the first part of my analysis, because I wondered why the demons finally chose to take possession of Maria Walters' body, when in fact in 162, Angela / Pazuzu did in fact say that you were never going to be one of us. Now, again, maybe somebody on the other side of things disagreed with Angela's assessment about Maria Walters, or maybe because the demons knew that Marcus would never give in, and somehow or another Bennett was not going to be a vessel that they could take as well, that somehow or another Maria Walters became a vessel of last resort, a choice of last resort. That's what I'm kind of thinking here, because Angela did in fact say that Maria Walters was unworthy to be an instrument of their will, save for what they could use her for as she is, but never as an actual host. So I'm just curious why they chose her, but maybe I've answered my own question in that regard. If you have some different ideas, let me know what you think in the comments section. Now, Maria's possession does give Marcus and Bennett the opportunity that they need to escape, while these two priests here in the foreground, who I also think are in fact demonically possessed as well, are distracted by the fact that Maria Walters has now become fully one of them. This gives Bennett and Marcus the opportunity they need to break free of their bonds and escape. And once again, these two great warrior priests of the church, two great warrior priests of God in the greater sense, use their trained and innate talents to escape and in fact kill both of these men. And as you probably remember from some of my other reviews, I started calling Marcus the Punisher from here on out, because this is a man, as I said before, he is willing not only to fight in the spiritual sense against the forces of darkness, but in fact to take them to task and take them on in the physical sense, and he has in fact done that in the past. And we can see also from a previous episode that Bennett has done the same thing. So these guys are not just quote-unquote good men of the cloth. These guys are some tough fellows here, and they deserve the respect in that sense. I was a bit surprised, to be honest with you, about how violent Maria Walters' possession was. I mean, you can see her here frothing at the mouth. She was spasming and convulsing. It really looked like she was in the throes of death rather than being possessed. I mean, we've never seen a possession this violent before in this TV series. So it kind of gave me, it just kind of jumped out at me. I'm not entirely sure why. I don't know if it had something to do with Maria Walters herself, or if it had something to do with the demons who were in control of her, or taking control of her body. But it was very intriguing. We really did not see this level of possession going on with the police superintendent, Jaffe. We didn't see... Well, we saw the effects of it with Casey, but we didn't. When she was actually possessed, we still don't know how Casey got possessed, but we never saw this level of original possession. That is, when the demon first took control of Casey's body, we never saw her, what kind of throes of possession she was actually in, but we do see it with Maria Walters, and I think this is actually one of the most violent possessions that we've seen so far on this TV series, and it was very intriguing from a dramatic standpoint and otherwise. Now, of course, as Tomas continues to battle the demon in one of the 3 rooms, his mind in this instance, back inside of his grandmother's apartment in Mexico. As he continues to battle Pazuzu here, we see that Pazuzu really believes that he's about to win and that Marcus is about to kill himself, and that in killing himself, he will have committed the mortal sin of suicide, which will condemn his soul to hell forever. But we see that Tomas actually wakes up out of this induced state that he is in, and he begins to fight back against the demon. And in the process, he says some very interesting things. He comes to some very intriguing realizations that I would like to go through. Just as Pazuzu, in the form of Marcus, believes that he has won this battle, Tomas pulls the knife away from his throat, and he begins to confess that many of the things that Pazuzu has said about him are in fact true. But here is the linchpin of these confessions. Even though Tomas knows that these things are true, that Pazuzu has said, he knows that Pazuzu is not telling him these things in order to redeem him, but to destroy him. And in this recognition, Tomas's understanding of his own principles, of the principles of faith and what righteousness really means, begins to shine through. And as we go through this is why I want to go through this, because I believe this is, again, one of the more powerful scenes of this episode, besides the fact when Marcus himself told Simon in the previous scene that I am not dying for the bloody church, I'm dying for God. I want to go through what Tomas did that, in my opinion, is a parallel to that in this particular scene. Tomas confesses that he has sinned, and he knows this. But what does he say in response to Pazuzu's threats and intimidation, to his lies and his deceit and his trickery? He says, "When Angela came to me, I was not honest. When Jessica came to me, I was not strong. And when his grandmother needed him, he was not there." But even though those things were true, what else does he say to Pazuzu? He tells Pazuzu that he was wrong when he tried to condemn Tomas by saying that he had nothing, that he was nothing. Tomas tells Pazuzu that he has faith, that he has hope, and that he has love. And here's where I want to draw a parallel to where I see Tomas becoming more and more the kind of man of God that not only perhaps God wants him to be, but that he himself wants to be. And in understanding that, I wanted to quote something here that I think actually testifies to that in terms of what the kind of man Tomas is recognizing himself to become. In the book of 1 Corinthians, or the letter of 1 Corinthians chapter 13, the first letter of the Apostle Paul to the Corinthian Christians. Chapter 13 is about the exercise of the gifts of love. And it says this: "Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I have become as sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, but have not love, it profits me nothing. Love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself, is not puffed up. Love does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails." And in the final verse of that chapter, verse 13, St. Paul says, "And now abide faith, hope, love, these three, but the greatest of these is love." Tomas, in recognizing this in himself, in my opinion, demonstrates a parallel of what the first letter of Corinthians, chapter 13, demonstrates and says. But Tomas demonstrates it in a way that shows the demon that even though he knows he is a sinner, even though Tomas knows that he is weak, because he has these principles in his heart, And because he has love and faith, he cannot be defeated by this monster. And that whatever this creature throws at him, through these principles and through an upholding of these principles, Tomas knows that he can find the strength to stand and face them, and he can find the strength to be what he believes God wants him to be. Not just a man of the cloth, but an exorcist. And that is why I think that this scene stands up there with the other scene with Marcus saying that he is willing to die for God as one of the most powerful scenes in this entire episode. And I wanted to point that out. And as Tomas rises up from this induced state that Pazuzu has put him in, you begin to see the power of human faith and the power of understanding spring forth in this episode. And I think that this is actually something that is that should be testified to about this series, whether you actually believe in the principles of Christianity or not. It's shined forth in these episode very distinctly, and I think it's shined forth in other parts of this series very distinctly. And you see it here again in this final part of this scene where Tomas rises up. He pulls the crucifix from his hand. He pulls the crucifix from his jacket, and he says the power of Christ compels you, at which point you truly see Tomas's faith shine forth, because what happens after that, of course, is that Pazuzu is repulsed through the air back onto the other side of the room. And this is where I think you see Tomas's faith truly begin to demonstrate itself. And I think that when he says he has hope, he has love, he has faith, he's truly beginning to become, as I said before, the kind of man that he wants to be, the kind of man, at least, that God wants him to be. And that shows, once again, that just as the book of Hebrews talks about in chapter 11, verse 1, it says, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Where Tomas originally failed to cast out the demon in the first scenes of the show, when he is hurled up against the ceiling and receives this lash to the head, he then stands up in the middle of this part of the show and screams, the power of Christ compels you, and it does in fact work. This is a testimony to his ability, to his own faith, but it's also a testimony of his ability to be used as an instrument and a vessel of the living God. And so this is very intriguing in that sense to watch this be observed and testified to in terms of how the show deals with this analysis in this fictional realm. Okay, so now we see that the demon knows that it is losing. It is resorting to really these kind of silly displays of power by levitating itself, by throwing furniture around the room. It's basically fighting back the way a bully would fight back, the way a child would fight back. For all of its power and for all of its knowledge, you really see how weak this demon actually is. And this is very intriguing when you start seeing it make these kinds of displays. So here Pazuzu is in Angela's mind, and again, once more, you see just how weak and truly what a coward this demon actually is, for all of its ability to create these strongholds in the minds of its opponents, in the minds of Angela, in the minds of the Rance family as a whole, in the mind of Tomas, and it demonstrates that all authority. All spiritual authority over strongholds and principalities is in fact through Christ in this storyline. And what you see ultimately, that this is not just about human strength alone. This is about understanding the power of faith and understanding the power of principle. And it's very interesting also to me to observe what the family does here in their decision to be united in this fight as well, for their mother and for their family as a whole. At first you see Catherine and her father retreating. They're about to try to leave the house, and Casey is right behind them. But then, of course, she realizes that she cannot leave. She understands the fight that her mother is in. She understands the fight that Tomas is in, because she herself has been possessed, and she knows what a struggle this actually is, what an epic battle this actually is going on right now for the entire Rance family. and for Tomas as well as a participant. So she goes back and she begins to recite the Lord's Prayer, and her father and sister join her in doing this. And I think this also again shows the union that the family has in this time of turmoil, this time of trouble, this time of tribulation, to stand united for their entire family, knowing that it is, in fact, as Tomas said before, love, hope, and faith, which they are representing here through this union and the reciting of the Lord's Prayer in their efforts to stand firm against this demonic infestation. Now, as Pazuzu's power and authority over the family begins to succumb to the authority of Christ, exercised through Tomas, we also see something else interesting happening parallel and in conjunction with this in Angela's own mind. Angela opens the last door in the remaining stronghold of her mind, and she begins to fight back against the demon. And this, of course, is the tide-turning point in the events of the story. Simultaneously, we are watching Simon walking up to the Pope's motorcade and believing he is about to gain the ultimate triumph for which he has planned and executed everything for the past 6 years in his human form. And, of course, we see that there is, in fact, an intervention that is about to take place in that regard as well. At the apex of his triumph, Simon says the morning star sends his greetings, of course referring to Lucifer. But then again, does the morning star send his greetings, or does Marcus the Punisher send his? Marcus makes a new impression in Simon's throat, and of course he saves Pope Sebastian from being assassinated in front of this entire crowd and perhaps damaging the faith of tens of thousands, perhaps even millions watching around the world on television, and of course those people who are there in the crowd. And at the same time, of course, we see something else occurring with Angela. Pazuzu, for all his greatness and all his authority and all of his power to intimidate, is beaten and broken by Angela and left screaming and whining on her floor, the floor of one of the 3 rooms, the floor of her mind, like a whimpering child. And in this, we see just how strong and great and powerful and intimidating Pazuzu really is. He is nothing. He is absolutely and utterly nothing. So as the family rallies around the emancipated Angela, we are left to wonder at this point if, in fact, she has died. But we know from following events that she is, in fact, alive, and that it is the demon who only has been killed, quote-unquote, that is expelled from her body to go back to wherever it is going to perhaps receive and face any other punishments or justice that perhaps God may choose to bestow upon it at this point. But at this point, we do know that Angela is free. So now in this wrap-up of all the events that have occurred, we see Marcus and Casey sitting together as he encourages her to stay strong in her faith and stay strong within herself, not just for herself, but also for the rest of her family. And ultimately, of course, this means the rest of the family staying united and strong together. Marcus tells Casey that they don't get to win, meaning the forces of darkness, be they natural or supernatural. And that's the deal that we have to tell ourselves as we wake up every morning and face the world. So I think that this is a good place here to wrap up part 2. I will conclude with some brief thoughts on in part 3. And until next time, we'll see you soon, Exorcist fans.